Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown, more specifically, a brand new Albums I Missed video. Today we are going to talk about a slew of albums that came out in the month of February 2023 that, unfortunately, I just didn't talk about it. Maybe I didn't have the time, maybe I didn't think it was worth a full-blown album review, maybe I just didn't know about it whatsoever until just this very day, just this very moment. For the record, I feel as if I've already addressed some of the most interesting albums that came out in this past month, but hey, there's always lots of other stuff, so without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Albums I missed, February 2023, booyah, let's go, hell yes! First up, we have Dance Devil Dance, the latest studio album from Avatar. These guys have gotten very popular over the course of the last few years. Personally, I think that they're a little overrated, and this album really didn't do anything to change my mind. I mean, it's not like terrible or anything, you know, it's got some bouncy grooves, and it's got a decent enough attitude and vibe, and I can appreciate some of the more eclectic flavors and influences that are sometimes kind of thrown around. I can appreciate some of the sillier tones and some of the wackier lyricism. But yeah, overall, despite Avatar's best efforts, this just ain't my thing. I left it unenthused and kind of bored and just hungry for something better and smarter and more clever and more interesting. These guys are clearly doing their best. I'm not trying to knock their craft. It's clear to me that if you are a fan of Avatar, you're probably going to like this record. I'm not, hence why I didn't like this record. But y'all kept asking about it, hence why we're talking about it now. So, yeah. There we go. Moving on, hopefully to something a little more exciting. Next up, we have Strength 2 Deep Cuts, a brand new EP from Unto Others, featuring a slew of songs that unfortunately were not included on their previous full-length studio album, Strength. Do not think for a moment that this means that they are bad, that they are the microwave leftovers and scraps of that album, because that is not the case. They were not on Strength simply because Unto Others wrote it as a double album, but Roadrunner Records insisted that it be released as a single album. Single disc. Trim that shit down. Unto Others fully believes that these songs stand up against anything from Strength, and honestly, I think I would say the same. All of these songs are very well written, very well produced. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of fire, a lot of energy. Much like a lot of other stuff that Unto Others has done so far, it does a great job at combining the melancholy and the atmosphere and like the guitar tones and vibes of like classic goth rock with the more ferocious kind of guitar-driven riffery and songwriting of classic heavy metal. I've always kind of said that Unto Others feels like a mix of The Cure and Sisters of Mercy with like some Ozzy Osbourne and the Scorpions, and this EP continues to prove that for me. Overall, I really like this EP, and if you like Unto Others, you will also probably also like it, so check it out. Hell yes. Next up, we have The Good Ship Lollipop, brand new studio album from hardcore metal supergroup Venomous Concept, featuring members of Napalm Death, Brutal Truth, and Nuclear Assault. In the past, these guys have typically been responsible for relatively straightforward, but ultimately really fun, urgent, politically charged hardcore metal jammery. In some ways, this record isn't too much of an exception, but there are some more expansive and experimental flavors that I do really appreciate. Like, you definitely get the vibe that these guys were paying more attention to, like, 90s hardcore and post-hardcore and alt-rock, you know, like Helmet and Refused. You also get the vibe that these guys were listening to, like, some more modern stuff like Turnstile, especially with some of the melodies and hooks and harmonies that you can hear across the record, some of the more ambient, atmospheric soundscapes. It makes for a record that feels a little bit more unpredictable than your typical hardcore record, while still being rooted in everything that makes hardcore and metal really fun, you know? Like, this isn't a total deviation in the vein of the aforementioned Glow On. Like, there's just enough aggressive, dirty, nasty, gnarly shit that, you know, your typical punk hardcore metal fan would probably still really enjoy this. I didn't do a review for this, but there's a part of me that wishes I had, because this was a genuine surprise. Like, I really wasn't expecting much from this, but I ended up really liking it. A lot of great songs on here. Slackjaw, Pigs, the title track, Fractured, all of which have their own vibes, their own things going on. You know, Pigs is like really sludgy, Slackjaw is like kind of the classic 90s hardcore worship, Good Ship Lollipop has like these weird kind of jagged rhythms and starts and stops. Fractured almost feels in line with like the aforementioned Unto Others, like if Unto Others tried to write a Turnstile song. Yeah, I like it a lot. Had I gone ahead and reviewed this, solid 4 out of 5. Definitely check this out. This was a big surprise for me. Next up, we have Celestial Rot from All Out War. This one was much less of a surprise, but in a good way. You know, All Out War have been very well known for putting out some high quality, like, extreme metallic hardcore. This record is no exception. It's tight, it's explosive, it's angry, straight to the fucking point, no fat, no filler, whole thing wraps up in like 25 fucking minutes. They're putting extra emphasis on the more extreme elements. I mean, there's some riffs and some solos here and there that really wouldn't be out of place on like a black metal or a death metal record, but aside from that, it really is All Out War doing what they do best, and honestly, thank God for it. When you're writing music this heavy and this fun and this engaging, you don't really need to stray too much from your sound. Like, they just kick fucking ass and they fucking go home, and that's that, and I respect the shit out of that. Check this out if you just want to, like, drink some beer and pound some fucking pavement. This shit is fun. This shit is heavy. Plain and simple. Like, whip this bad boy out when you're in the mood to punch something. I promise it'll be perfect. Like chicken and waffles, you know, rum and coke. It'll pair perfectly. Next up, we have Distractions, a brand new studio album from See You Next Tuesday. I'm not really familiar with a lot of other stuff that See You Next Tuesday has put out, and that's not likely to change after having heard Distractions, because I'm not a fan of Distractions. I found this to just be 28 minutes of ear fatigue and overwhelming static and nonsensical craziness. It combines the craziest and zaniest and the most brutal elements of like grind and mathcore and deathcore to erratic, unhinged, overwhelming, and annoying effect. Like, I really did not get anything out of this, and I looked forward to it being over. There's clearly a lot of anger and intensity here, and I can respect that, but I mean, it's not going anywhere especially substantial or memorable, in my opinion. This album is like the sonic equivalent to being stabbed repeatedly by a schizophrenic madman, and maybe that's the intention on some level, and maybe you'll dig that, maybe you'll be into that. If that's the case, good for you, but yeah, I'm not. Like, I really tried my best with this one, folks, but I just don't get it. This is probably one of the most obnoxious and annoying records of the year so far for me, if we're being brutally honest here. Next up, we have Director's Cuts, a brand new studio album from To The Grave. Good old-fashioned, groovy, technical deathcore. It's crushing, it's pummeling. It's fun, it's brutal. I enjoyed this record. Musically, there's nothing like truly groundbreaking or new here, but everything is really well done. Like, there's a good variety of grooves and riffs and beat downs. You know, everything is super tight, super well produced. The big highlight for me is the concept. I really like lyrically and politically where this album is going. It deals very heavily with how we treat animals and in turn the earth. The way the band specifically phrases it is, we are all the writers and directors in an unending horror film. It's actors unwilling and the scenes taking place in every circus, zoo, lab, farm, and slaughterhouse that stain our green globe. Hence the term director's cuts. Very clever, very cool. This kind of ultimately ends up feeling like deathcore's answer to something like cattle decapitation, you know? Specifically records like The Anthropocene Extinction and Monolith of Inhumanity. Very well done, very urgent and poignant. It touches on issues that, like, actually matter in a way that doesn't feel really distracting or preachy. Really dig this thing for sure. It probably wouldn't change your mind if you outright hated deathcore, but if you're looking for something just a little different, something a little bit more mentally stimulating, something that isn't just a bunch of, like, stupid fucking breakdowns, boom, this is it. Enjoy, dig in. Next up, we have Heritage from Distant, and it's fine. Yeah. Honestly, that's all I got. It's fine. It's by no means incompetently produced or performed. It's just really, really fucking boring. Like, there's nothing really that interesting musically, lyrically, conceptually. It's the same riffs and beats and vocals you've heard in 100 other, like, modern metal and deathcore records. The same computer effects and synths that you've heard in 100 other modern metal and deathcore records. I honestly forgot entirely about this album until I started preparing for this Albums I Missed video, and I got a funny feeling I'm going to forget about this thing entirely once the final video goes online. So yeah, why bother spending a ton of time on something that is just thoroughly, remarkably mid? Like, just whatever. It's an album. It's fine. Who cares? Next up, we have This Is Tomorrow, brand new studio album from Siege of Power, yet another metal supergroup today, this one featuring current and former members of Autopsy, Asphyx, and Hail of Bullets. And it's alright. It's fun. I dig it. Not exactly mind-blowing, revolutionary stuff, but if you're in the mood for just some grim, sinister, kind of brutal death thrash fusion jams, this'll definitely do the trick. Chris Reifert on vocals, just absolutely killing it. It's nice to see him doing something a little different from Autopsy, but, you know, just still absolutely fucking destroying it. The man is a beast, and there's definitely an argument at this point to be made that he's one of, like, the best extreme metal vocalists. Like, his range, his power, his ferocity, it's fucking fantastic. He's definitely the star of the show, in my opinion. I mean, he doesn't just have the spotlight, he straight up fucking steals it 90% of the time. And honestly, that's for the best, because it's not as if any of the music here is, like, really that, you know, intuitive or like, really insane, you know? If you're familiar with, like, any kind of thrash death stuff, then you're pretty familiar already with a lot of what's happening here. That's not to say that it's derivative or predictable, but as I said before, not mind-blowing, not revolutionary. Still, it's fun, and I can live with fun. Fun is fun, after all. So fuck it. Check it out. Why not? Have some fun. Go for it. Next up, we have Might and Power, a brand new studio album from Megaton Sword. I dig it. Solid continuation of everything we heard from them on their previous studio album, Blood Hails Steel, Steel Hails Fire. A lot of brooding, epic, dramatic, classic heavy metal with some power metal, with even some doomy undertones here and there. The songwriting here does a really good job at bringing in some righteous, ripping riffs, but combining it with some slow-moving and very, like, theatrical arrangements and rhythms and drawls, making it feel all the more important, all the more badass. The production here, too, is really cool. It does a good job at making this feel, like, retro and old school and vintage, but still feeling, like, really clean and modern. I'm reminded to a certain extent of, like, a lot of 80s metal, but even, like, some early Judas Priest, you know, like, Sad Wings of Destiny. Like, it has that same kind of, like, vibe and feel, but polished and a little bit more modern. Overall, good variety of riffs, no fat, no filler to speak of, everyone's doing a great job, everyone sounds like they're having a fucking blast. I dig it. This is kind of what I want from, like, classic heavy metal, power metal worship. This is fun. This is cool. This makes me feel badass listening to this, you know? Like, I actually was listening to this while working out the other day, and immediately I'm like, oh my fucking god, I'm so pumped! Next up, we have Harrowing from Mithridatism, featuring current and former members of Abhorrent and the Faceless. I kind of like this. I dig it. This is another record where I'm like, yeah, not exactly mind-blowing or revolutionary, but there are some cool ideas. This kind of plays around with some very disorienting, dissonant kind of technical death metal, and it kind of shrouds all of that in, like, classic black metal darkness and despair. Parts of this remind me of Ulcerate Duh. I'm also reminded to a certain extent of, like, a more simplified take on Artificial Brain or Ad Nauseum. I dig that. It's cool. I think the black metal flavors do enough to add a little extra uniqueness and freshness and originality to this whole thing. It definitely helps sell a lot of that anger and torment and anguish. Some of the tracks go on maybe a little bit too long, but overall the entire album wraps up in a relatively sharp 35 minutes, so I have no real issue to complain. I dig it. Check it out. If you're looking for something a little darker and a little bit more fucked up from your tech death, I think this is probably the place to go. Next up, we have Carnal Heresy from Wretched Fate. I don't really have a ton to say here. This is just good old-fashioned, like, meat and potatoes death metal, but done really well. Like, it's bloodthirsty, it's vicious, it's straight to the point. A lot of Cannibal Corpse and Bloodbath and Entombed Worship, but fuck it, all those bands rule. I don't see the major issue. Obviously, if you're just, like, totally done with death metal, obviously, if you just don't like death metal, you're not gonna dig this. I understand that. I feel that. I happen to dig death metal. I happen to dig this. Plain and simple. It doesn't live up to the heights of some other, like, retro death metal worship in the vein of, like, recent records from Undeath or Ripped to Shreds, but it's a more than satisfying record in its own regard, and anyone just looking for a bunch of really gnarly riffs and such will be more than happy. I totally forgot that Dope put out a new album, which should tell you immediately how I feel about that album. I don't know, Blood Money Part 0 or some shit it was called. I don't know. It was fucking stupid. Fucking cringy, stupid-ass, D-tiered, new metal, alt metal at absolute best. Really only bringing it up because I know for a fact at least one motherfucker will. Yeah. Dope? More like nope. Alright, moving on. And that's it. Those are all the albums that I feel I missed in the month of February 2023. Obviously, there's probably still something that flew under the radar that you feel I should devote some time and attention to, so let me know about those albums in the comment section below. Feel free to message me on Instagram as well, at The Metal Meltdown. Don't bother with Facebook or email. I almost never respond. I'm actually infamously terrible at responding to, like, emails and messages on Facebook, as, some people will tell you. Press this button to subscribe. Look, there are other videos here. That's neat. That's cool. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.